Good evening. I'm Nisa Petrilli.
I'm Jay Kaplan.
I'm Steve Ferguson.
And I'm Sean Roman.
And this is On the Sports Lines for January 18th, 2018. The third Sunday of the new year brings us the NFL's Conference Championship round. Tonight we'll analyze Eagles versus Vikings in the NFC, followed by Patriots versus Jaguars in the AFC. Then we'll make the case for 3 candidates to be enshrined as part of the Pro Football Hall of Fame's class of 2018. All that plus a look ahead to the offseason for the Jets and Giants. As always, you can find us on social media. Follow us on Twitter @OnTheSportsLines and like us on Facebook at facebook.com/OnTheSportsLines. The NFC title game features the #1 seed Philadelphia Eagles hosting the #2 seed Minnesota Vikings. What is the pressing question for each team? What's the must-see matchup? The guys will break it down. Sean, pressing question for the Eagles. How will Doug Peterson hide Nick Foles in the offensive game plan?
You know, I don't think he has to. If you go back a few seasons and the Eagles were a little better than expected, then Nick Foles leads the team this season or won a couple seasons to where he is right now. Nick Foles, his record as a starter is absolutely amazing, if you would say. I mean, I wrote it down somewhere. Let me see if I have it. It's something 17-4.
Wow.
Now, I'm a guy in terms of looking at sports analysis. I'm not into metrics on pedestrian teams as much as I am as to you. If you're in the position and get the win for that team, if you show that leadership quality, you're showing something transcendent and you're getting that team over the line. That's the ultimate goal, and Nick Foles has a history of doing that. He is going to look what is absolutely the best position in every circumstance, whether it's to throw back, look for the open man, and pass, or whether it's just to run the ball. He's not going to get a huge lead on you. He's not going to blow a lead for you. I think, though, this is not a case. I mean, Trent Dilfer gets a lot of criticism being the guy who just, wouldn't lose it for the Ravens.
Yeah, right. Yep.
I mean, I think if you look at his stats throughout the years, and with the Eagles, 17-4 as a starter, he is quite underrated. He's exactly where he deserves to be. And the guy on the other side of the ball is not named Manning with, a number of Super Bowls behind him. Not named Roethlisberger with another Super Bowls. Breeze only even has one. If you look at it like that, Roethlisberger, what? He has 2 or 3 Super Bowls.
Yep.
And Brady with exponentially more.
Yep.
So, Foles is just as good as anybody in terms of being able to bring his team to the next level. So I have a lot of confidence in him going into the weekend.
So, Steve, pressing question for the Vikings. What does Case Keenum need to do versus the Eagles pass rush?
Case Keenum, in my opinion, doesn't have to do anything spectacular. He has been as good a quarterback as anybody in the league this year. He's been essentially almost the Cinderella quarterback of the league because nobody expected him to be this good. I do think, though, against the Eagles, he's going to have to roll out a little bit more and use his legs more because Philadelphia has an extremely tough pass rush. I was watching the game with a friend of mine, and the one thing he said to me, he said, when does he step up in the pocket? He's a very unusual passer in that sense that he really doesn't, but the way the Vikings play defense, if he just does his job, moves around a little bit, I think he'll be fine.
So, Jay, what's the matchup that you're looking at for this game?
The matchup I'm going to be looking at is the Eagles secondary versus Adam Thielen and Stephon Diggs. I mean, that the Vikings are in the NFC title game with Case Keenum at quarterback is something no one could have predicted. But while a Tier 1 defense gets a lot of the credit for where they are, Keenum, as you said, has done an admirable job running the offense. And when he's had to make plays, he's had the luxury of being able to throw to arguably the best tandem of wide receivers in the NFL. Thielen's been a chain-moving machine, and Diggs can take the top off of any defense with his big playability. They combined for 34 plays of 20-plus yards or more. How the Eagles' 17th ranked pass defense, specifically their secondary, covers those two receivers, to me, is going to determine the outcome of the game. Jalen Mills, Ronald Darby, Patrick Robinson will get the bulk of the coverage snaps, and they'll be tasked with stopping Thielen and Diggs. Being sure with their tackling to make sure they can limit yards after the catch will be huge, as evidenced by what happened in Diggs' game-winning TD against New Orleans. The things that I'm going to be looking for, will Darby get assigned to blanket Thielen, or are the Eagles going to follow their usual game plan of keeping their corners on each side of the field without any change? Robinson actually graded out as the NFL's sixth best corner according to Pro Football Focus, but he plays the slot the whole year. Will the Eagles take him off and assign him to either Thielen or Diggs to switch things up? These are the things I'm going to be looking for in this matchup.
So the AFC title game features the #1 seed New England Patriots hosting the #3 seed Jacksonville Jaguars. What is the pressing question for each team? What's the must-see matchup? The guys will break it down. Sean, pressing question for the Patriots. Is there one? They look pretty unbeatable.
The Patriots, each year, they look pretty unbeatable.
Yes.
Yeah.
They got through Deflategate last year. This year, the difference is they've been going through a lot of critique with how they handled the Garoppolo trade, and also Tom Brady's now. How effective is his throwing arm going to be with that injury that he has?
Yeah, it's overblown.
I would say, though, that they're matching up against the most tricky team for them, the team with the best chance to beat them. The Jaguars, president of the team is Tom Coughlin, who has a lot of experience bedeviling the Patriots in games that mean the most. He's an organizational leader. When he went to that team when they were an expansion team, very quickly got them into the championship game.
Yes.
Ultimately went to the Giants 2 Super Bowls, and each time there was a juggernaut of the Patriots. Now, in 1 year, he's got this team that couldn't get on the right track in the championship game behind a very strong battery of a #1 draft pick and a quarterback, and something Eli Manning never had, which is a guy like Leonard Fournette.
Yeah,
and also,
that's right.
they have the type of defense that just poses a ton of problems for the Patriots. That's that 4-man rush. I mean, guys like Malik Jackson, Aubrey Jones, Calais Campbell leading, Dante Fowler. They don't blitz a lot.
No.
That allows, a lot of people to be back in coverage. That really stymies Brady. And they're not the type of team like the Falcons who are going to come up to a big lead, but they're going to be within that game and within striking distance. And the Jaguars are the best suited team to come out on top just by a little against the Patriots. Look at how they played the Steelers, who were another great team this year. Once they smashed them, and the other time in the playoffs they got just over the wire, and that's what I think is going to happen when they meet this Sunday.
Man, I hope you're right.
So do I.
Steve, pressing question for the Jaguars. Will Blake Bortles have to do even more versus the Patriots than he did versus the Steelers?
With the Jaguars' great running game, and it really is, you look at Leonard Fournette, T.J. Yeldon, and Chris Ivory, and I remember when I watching Jet games how well Chris Ivory ran against the Patriots. I really don't think Bortles has to do a whole lot more. He threw for 212 yards against the Steelers, and all he has to do is make sure his passes are accurate. That's the one weakness he has as a quarterback. But his ability to get out of the pocket and make plays and throw on the run is something the Patriots will probably have a little problem with.
So, Jay, what's the matchup you're looking at for this game?
Well, every Patriots postseason game, we invariably break down, it focuses on either Tom Brady or Rob Gronkowski. Now, the New England tight end is the definition of a matchup nightmare, which is why seeing how opponents choose to defend him will always be my matchup to watch in the AFC title game is no different. The Jaguars are not known for changing their scheme based on the team they're playing or a particular player. They can occasionally and will put quarterbacks Jalen Ramsey and A.J. Boye in man coverage on the outside, but aside from that and a couple of wrinkles with quarters coverage or an occasional man coverage blitz, Jacksonville plays a very straight-up, predictable cover 3 that their focus is on out-executing whoever they're playing, not out-scheming them. Now, what I want to see is if they match Ramsey up on Gronkowski, especially in obvious passing downs. Ramsey's built like a safety, one of the most physical corners in the NFL, and when you consider that the NFL's #1 pass defense allowed quarterbacks to complete passes to tight ends at 64% as opposed to 50% to wide receivers, the Jags might want to change things up just a little bit schematically and put their best pass risk defender on Brady's #1 weapon. Will the matchup happen? How often? That's what I'll be watching for.
True. The Jets finished the season with a 5-11 record, last in the AFC East. They head into the offseason with plenty of questions, including who they'll take with the #6 pick in the draft. Our guys will look at 3 storylines that will be talked about in the months leading up to the draft. Steve, was retaining head coach Todd Bowles the right move?
You know what? It definitely was, in my opinion, because in order for a team to at least start getting better, and the Jets are starting to get to that point, you need to have two things. You need to have your head coach in place and your general manager. So kudos to the Jets for at least being aware of the fact that Bowles and McCagnon both need to stay. And also, the media said that the Jets were going to win 1 or 2 games this year. Well, that didn't happen. They won 5, and they could have easily won 7 or 8 last year with a team that had virtually no talent. So now, with them having the 6th pick in the draft and $80 million in cap space, if you're a Jet fan, unless they blow it this year in the offseason in the draft, they're going to be much better coming this season.
So, Sean, which player does the team need to move on from and why?
Calling Captain Obvious. Before I get to that, I just want to say, to just almost answer something Steve said. When you're 5-11 and that is surprisingly good, you are the New York Jets.
Yes.
But the answer is Muhammad Wilkerson.
Yeah.
He got a huge contract, and for whatever reason, his attitude, and I guess you would say work ethic and desire to attend team meetings was severely underwhelming. Like, there was an incident a few years ago where he got hurt and there was a team meeting and he went out partying and it was his birthday and the team had a birthday cake for him and he decided not to show up, and that's kind of symbolic of the whole ordeal. It is guaranteed that they are going to move on for him because there comes a time in his contract where he's going to be guaranteed more money, and the Jets are obviously going to cut him before that time. So, due to underwhelming performance over the last 2 years, he had 12.5 sacks in 2015 and only about 8 over the last 2 years.
Yeah.
They're moving on from Wilkerson, and they should be better off for it.
Yeah.
Jay, what should the plan for the quarterback position be going forward?
You know, honestly, this continues to be an unsettled position for the Jets. Now, I still believe the future starter for this team is someone who is not currently on the roster. Before he was let go, offensive coordinator John Morton made the case that he wanted Josh McCown back, and I am in agreement with that. McCown was solid managing the offense. He made the occasional play. He's exactly what you need both as a veteran mentor and a bridge starter if the Jets draft a quarterback, or he's perfect as a number 2 if they look to make a splash in free agency. Now, I said back on the 2016 NFL Draft Show that taking Christian Hackenberg in the 2nd round was a huge reach and a bad pick. Hasn't gotten into a game in his 2 years, and he's been inactive for most of that time. He's not the answer. Time to cut bait. Bryce Petty's not the answer either. He had potential. I liked him coming out of Baylor. He needs a change of scenery. Plenty of quarterbacks in this draft, and unless the Jets can somehow get Kirk Cousins or Alex Smith to come to New York, the draft is the way to go. Jets GM Mike McCagnon has said they will trade up if there is someone that they really like. McCown in a draft pick, I'm fine with that plan, but this time they absolutely must get it right.
Yep.
Well, the Giants finished the season with a 3-13 record, last in the NFC East. They head into the offseason with even more questions than the Jets, including if they'll take a quarterback with the number 2 pick in the draft, and who will be coaching him. Our guys will look at 3 things that new GM Dave Gettleman will be dealing with leading up to the draft. Steve, Vikings offensive coordinator Pat Shurmur is likely to be the next head coach. Is he the right fit or the wrong fit?
You know what? This is a tricky one. He is the right fit in terms of his experience. He's been an assistant coach for years. He actually did coach the Cleveland Browns, believe it or not, for 2 years.
We won't hold that against him.
Yeah, enough said about that. But the one problem I have with Pat Shurmur, I've heard 2 things about him that disturb me a little bit. Number 1, they say his temperament, he's a very sensitive guy, and the New York media, once they smell blood in the water, they will attack. And the second thing I heard about him is he's a bit of a drill sergeant. That may not sit well with some of the players on the team, particularly one Odell Beckham.
Jr.,
So
yeah.
I think this could be a little tricky, but we have to see how it plays out.
Sean, which player does the team need to move on from and why?
I think that the Giants are going to move on from Eli Apple. He's also been fighting with the coaches. Other players have spoken out against him. I do think, though, that he's being scapegoated, that he's more of a symptom of something that was going wrong for that, and it comes down for the Giants, and it comes down to leadership. I think than the cause of anything that was happening. Was he more problematic to the team than anything that Odell Beckham did? Or is it just a matter of talent between the two and the gap that you're blaming Eli Apple as opposed to Odell Beckham? Something just completely broke down. And I don't know if it was Ben McAdoo that he couldn't get control over the team because the year before he did quite well. But when Tom Coughlin had control of this team, there were many years that the Giants had bad records, but they never gave up. They were in the games to the end.
Yep.
They always fought. They were throwing flags. But, in the latter half of this season, the Giants were like, a shadow of like the Cleveland Browns or the New York Jets.
Yeah.
They were just not the organization that is the New York Giants. So you have to blame leadership. McAdoo, if it was his fault or not, he did have to go, and whoever they get, I hope they do a better job because they have a strong nucleus and they can turn it around very quick, the Giants.
True. So, Jay, what should the team do about Eli Manning?
Well, pursuant to what Sean just said, I think they need to retain Eli for at least next year and possibly the year after. Now, Eli has 2 years remaining on his contract, and if I'm Dave Gettleman, I keep him for at least that season or the next one. Gettleman has 2 Super Bowl rings courtesy of Eli, and he knows what Eli brings to the table, and he knows that Eli has not had much to work with in terms of a running game, an offensive line, or even a receiving core this year. They have the number 2 pick in the draft, and it seems to be a foregone conclusion that the Giants will take a quarterback with their quarterback of the future with that pick, and I think that's even more likely now that both Josh Rosen and Sam Darnold have declared for the draft. Now, whether it's Rosen, Darnold, somebody else, or Davis Webb, who was last year's quarterback of the future pick. The future is close at hand for the Giants, and they need to be sure that they nail that future down. They don't want to be in the same situation that the Jets are in. Now, to me, that's why you keep Eli for the next 2 years. No better quarterback for whoever his successor turns out to be to learn from. Eli is a pro's pro, both on and off the field. And if the offensive line improves, something Gettleman has said is high on his list of priorities, and Odell can return to form, and he's already ahead of schedule with his workouts, then the Giants might even be competitive in the present while they prepare for the future. So I think you keep Eli.
Right.
I agree.
Agreed.
The 15 modern era finalists for the 2018 Pro Football Hall of Fame class were announced on January 2nd. The list will be pared down to 10 and then 5. The final 5 will be voted on, and the ones who receive at least 80% yes votes will be inducted into the hall. The class will be announced on Super Bowl weekend. Our panel is going to make the case for 3 of the finalists. Sean, who are you making the case for?
I think charging out of the gate, it should be Randy Moss. I think of all the people, he should be the first one elected in the Hall of Fame with the highest percentage. I remember years ago, awesome rookie season, set a touchdown record for rookies. He was part of that Vikings team that went 15-1. Yep. Supposed to be in the Super Bowl, but that Gary Anderson missed field goal really stymied them. Yep. And then he had that magical year in 2007 where 23 touchdowns set a record in terms of receiving. Touchdowns, he's second at 156, 15th in catches at 982, and receiving yards, he's way up there too at just over 15,000. To me, he's a shoo-in and probably have the highest percentage of all the nominees.
Stephen?
Well, for me, I'm going to say Terrell Owens. And yeah, I know this guy has a lot of controversy in his background. Yeah,
a little bit.
The Sharpie signing of the football on Monday Night Football, we probably remember that.
I like
very
that.
well.
That was entertaining.
That was interesting. The Hugh Douglas scenario in 2005, he got in a fist fight with him because he was talking about players faking injuries. We all remember the Donovan McNabb scenario where he said that, of course, they would have been undefeated if Brett Favre had been the quarterback. And we won't forget the one about D'Angelo Hall where he spit in his face in 2000 when he was covering him. But what
You're making the case against him.
No, but you know what?
Despite all that.
Despite all that, here's what he's done in his career. This guy is a 6-time Pro Bowler from 2000 to 2004. He also did it in 2007. A 5-time first-team All-Pro 2000 through 2002, again in 2004 and 2007, and a 3-time NFL receiving touchdown leader. The other thing he's done in his career, 1,679 receptions, 15,935 receiving yards, and he scored 2 touchdowns against every team in the NFL.
Wow, I did not know that.
And he has a few other stats that are very unique. So, yeah, he's kind of the class clown when you talk about who he was as a player, but once he got on that field, especially in the Super Bowl, if you remember, this guy was playing with a broken ankle, 10 catches for over 120 yards, and this close to winning a Super Bowl with the Eagles.
Yeah, I mean, he has the numbers. It's just a question whether the media is going to hold his attitude and his shenanigans against him. You guys will notice that we have not made the case for Ray Lewis. That's because we all feel that the Baltimore Ravens middle linebacker is a lock to get a bust in Canton.
Sure.
So I'm going to make the case for another linebacker and a contemporary of his, and that's Chicago Bears great Brian Urlacher, who himself has flatly said that Lewis is the greatest of all time at the position. Now, Urlacher himself is a beast in the middle. I look at it this way. If Rob Gronkowski was a linebacker, he'd be the second coming of Urlacher. Look, the numbers are there, 41.5 sacks, 22 interceptions, 8-time Pro Bowler, first team All-Pro 4 times, 2000 NFL Defensive Rookie of the Year, 2005 NFL Defensive Player of the Year, named to the All-Decade Team of the 2000s. He led the Bears to 4 division titles. He took them to Super Bowl 41, where they lost to Peyton Manning and the Colts. His team was top 5 in points against 4 different years while he was running the middle. And look, it's more than just the numbers for me when it comes to Urlacher. He was the main reason Lovie Smith's cover 2 defense was so successful in Chicago. The man was a freakish athlete. I mean, his ability not just to rush the passer and make plays sideline to sideline, but also to drop back in coverage and take away the middle third of the field just made him flat out invaluable. He was a true 3-down linebacker. Now, it's no coincidence that with Urlacher, the Bears finished top 5 in points, as I said, and the cover 2 defense took root in the NFL, and practically every team runs some form of it, to some extent because of Urlacher and what he was able to do with it. Now, when you put those numbers up and you got a guy who redefined the position for an era, to me, that's first ballot in my book. And the question for me will be, will the Hall of Fame committee do what it normally has and not vote 2 guys in on the first ballot at the same position? I think both of them should get in, Lewis and Urlacher. It's just a question. In the past, on occasion, the voting committee has not put in 2 guys from the same era that played the same position on the same draft class. So we'll see what happens.
Seems
there.
silly for them not to do it just because of that.
Agreed.
If both players are deserving.
How many players do you think they could put in?
Honestly, I'll
4
tell
or
you
5?
this. Lewis is, to me, is a lock. One of these 2 receivers
How about
is going.
Law? How about Atwater?
Ty Law could be. The question is he's going up against a contemporary in John Lynch. And it's a question of how do you rate those guys against each other and pick one over the other. Just like the question is, will the committee choose Moss or Owens one over the other?
Yeah.
Edgerrin James is also on this list, who at the height of his career was one of the biggest weapons in Peyton Manning's arsenal.
Yeah.
It's going to be a very interesting voting.
You could vote in as well.
True.
Yep.
Well, that music means it's time for the 3-minute warning. Sean, lead us off.
Olympic spirit, perhaps best epitomized by a well-known quote from one of our most fascinating presidents. The greatest honor history can bestow is the title of peacemaker. Richard Nixon said that, who actually had a Quaker background. And the Olympics, at their best, fulfill that role. During the ancient games, wars, they were actually suspended to permit safe travel to Olympus, and armies would never even threaten the competition. Today, the Olympic spirit is best epitomized by North and South Korean athletes willing to march together under one flag to start the games, and also by their agreeing to field a single Korean team for female ice hockey competitors. For citizens throughout the Korean Peninsula, some who remember the brutal war of the early 1950s, this is a chance to respect, even for the briefest of moments, the similarities of their fascinating and shared ancient culture, and also to root along with one another instead of against.
Why has the hot stove been so cold? As baseball fans, we understand the business of the game. Free agency essentially began in early December 2017. We're all so familiar with the top stars available, from J.D. Martinez to Hosmer to Darvish to Arrieta to Lynn, along with a string of seemingly endless middle relievers. Yet here we are in the first month of 2018, and still most of the big stars are available for the taking. You can't tell me that other than Wade Davis or Fernando Rodney, that no other free agents are worth going after. Does anyone understand why only today we're hearing about Hosmer being offered a 7-year deal by both the Padres and Royals, and J.D. Martinez being offered a 5-year deal from the Red Sox? Sticker shock, buyer beware, economic fear, fear of making a mistake. Who really knows? But what I do know is the time to act is right now. Show some guts and courage and get the help your team needs before it's too late to do so. And then you'll be sorry.
I spent the last 3 years watching Heisman Trophy winner Baker Mayfield put up video game numbers in an Oklahoma offense that seems tailor-made for his on-field wizardry. The show he put on between the white lines in the Sooners' Rose Bowl loss to Georgia should cement him as a first-round pick in the upcoming NFL draft. Jets fans were salivating on Twitter during the game about him joining Gang Green. But the show he put on outside those white lines should give teams a momentary pause. Mayfield was screaming, "It's over!" on the Sooners sideline when they went up 31-14 as halftime approached, and the cameras caught him doing it. Mayfield has played to the trash-talking frat boy jock stereotype all season, starting with jamming the Oklahoma flag at midfield after the win at Ohio State, right up through the Rose Bowl. He's gotten away with it mostly because he hasn't done anything Manziel-like. His outbursts appear to be about his passion for the game, and his emotional post-game press conference after the Rose Bowl would seem to bear that out. Now, while it may play well in Norman, it will not play well in New York. The media may eat it up, but the NFL isn't fond of overly brash rookies. Veterans on the team that drafts him will not really appreciate it until he actually accomplishes something on the field. Time to grow up a little bit, Baker. Keep the passion, but take the advice of the Georgia player who told you to humble yourself. It will go a long way.
Legendary broadcaster Keith Jackson passed away last week at the age of 89. He had a storied career calling NFL, NBA, and MLB games, Winter and Summer Olympics, as well as auto racing. He traveled to 31 countries for ESPN's Wide World of Sports and was the first play-by-play voice of Monday Night Football when it debuted in 1970. But Jackson was most well known as the voice of college football. His down-to-earth, relatable personality set the tone for games and made you feel like you knew him personally. He spawned so many memorable catchphrases like "Whoa Nelly," "Hello Heisman," the granddaddy of them all referring to the Rose Bowl, and the Big House for Michigan Stadium. These phrases became a part of the college football lexicon as we know it today. He received numerous awards and honors over his 40-year television career and was ingrained in college football culture. Jackson was the voice of so many big games and huge defining moments in sports. When you think back to those games, you remember his voice. He loved what he did, and he understood how to take fans through the journey of a game. The sports world lost a legend. Keith, you and your iconic voice will be greatly missed.
Amen.
Amen.
For Jay Kaplan, Steve Ferguson, and Sean Roman, I'm Nisa Petrilli. Thanks for spending part of your evening with us. We'll see you on February 1st for the On the Sports Line Super Bowl and Winter Olympics special. And remember, if you want to see this show again or catch up on any of the ones you might have missed, check us out at youtube.com/onthesportslines. Good night, everyone.
Night, everybody.
Good night.